The foster grandmother's house was lovely. It was quiet, it was peaceful, surrounded by bushland and open space. It was safe, it was familiar. It was just lovely, a lovely place to be. Nothing was ever suggested about any danger, and the next morning would change absolutely everything. G'day everybody. In Australia it's estimated that 20,000 children are reported missing every single year, and William Tyrrell is absolutely no exception. Welcome back to Fatal Files podcast. I'm Paula-Rose, and today we are looking into the case of William Tyrrell. He is a toddler who went missing in southeast Australia. Go to my Medium blog, links below, if you are wanting references and links to all the facts and a full article that I've written on this case. Well, with no further ado, let's begin. Some places have become quite famous for what they build, others for what they lose, and in Australia's mid-coast sits a small rural town called Kendall. It is a very quiet community surrounded by farmland and bushland and long empty roads. It sounds idyllic if you want to get away from it all. It's a kind of place where children play outside, where neighbours know each other, and where unusual things aren't supposed to happen. But something very unusual did happen in 2014. A 3-year-old boy vanished from a yard in broad daylight and never seen again. He was wearing a Spider-Man costume, and his name was William Tyrrell. So let's first of all think about the town of Kendall so we can get the setting of what we're talking about. And again, if you go onto my blog, you'll see some photos there, and there'll be links to Google, and you can actually navigate the area for yourself. So, before this whole mystery began, there was Kendall, and Kendall is a very historic town. It is a small township 30 kilometres from Port Macquarie in New South Wales, Australia. Long before the European settlement, the land belonged to the Barimpai people. They were traditional custodians of this region. They were Aborigines. They lived off the rivers, the forests, the coastal plains for thousands of years, and then the British came. European settlers arrived in the mid-1800s, drawn by timber and fertile land to the area. First of all, there was logging camps that were established, and then dairy farming became popular and grew very, very nicely, and it was a good surroundings. The weather was temperate. It wasn't too dry and it wasn't too wet, ideal for farming dairy. Rolling green farmland slowly replaced sections of dense bush. They cleared the bush and they planted and grew seeds for dairy cows to eat. And the rural community began to take shape over a period of time. In early 20th century, the North Coast Railway line connected Kendall to nearby towns and cities, which was ideal because people could get there. This is before the advent of that everybody had a car. The railway brought trade, families and small businesses. A general store was established, a school and a post office. But Kendall never became large. It remained so to this day. It was quiet, close-knit, predictable. The town eventually was named after Henry Kendall. He was one of Australia's earliest and most respected bush poets. He was known for writing about forests and the Australian landscape. But now the town hosts poetry events in his honour. Every single year they have an annual event, and people come from all around the world to Kendall. Kendall is rooted in nature, history and community. It was named after the poet Kendall. And in 2014 it became the very centre of one of Australia's haunting mysteries. Before he became a subject of national headlines, William Tyrrell was simply a little boy growing up in New South Wales. He was born on June the 26th, 2011, and I share this date with William. I was born on June the 26th as well, but not in 2011. But his early life, bless him, was really complicated. Court evidence later revealed that his biological parents struggled with domestic violence, substance abuse, prompting child protection authorities to intervene when William was only 9 months old, when the court ordered that he be removed from the care of his parents for safety reasons, which is just so sad. And before we judge these parents, please don't judge these parents. We don't know the background. Substance abuse is a mental sickness. Domestic violence is also, and it could be historic through the families. So let's spend a time to pray for them instead of judging them when we really don't know the circumstances. But here the focal point is little William. And so he was removed along with his sister as well. He had an older sister, and they went into the foster care system, which is huge. It's absolutely huge. And again, if you want all the statistics and the understanding of all that, go to my Medium blog. His parents didn't want him to go into foster care. They resisted, so they hid him for several weeks. They moved him between relatives, which police were unable to trace at the time, and they really didn't want to lose custody of little William. Eventually, the authorities located him, and he was placed into permanent foster care, and he would never return to live with his biological parents. But despite this, supervised visits continued. His mother, because she did regularly visit him, and, hats off to her. That's not an easy commitment. In the past, I have worked with families who have had their children extracted from their home, and very often the parents do not visit their children. That is a quite common occurrence. So hats off to this woman that did remain faithful to hold regular visits to her children. So the foster family was in Sydney, and they were the same foster parents that took his sister as well. They became his day-to-day world. They became his parents. He was described by them as cheerful, energetic, as you can probably see by the photos of the thumbnail, that he looks really energetic and affectionate. A lovely little boy. Everybody loved him. And he loved playing outside. He loved the outdoors. He loved climbing and running and discovering. And like many children of his age, he loved superheroes. And his superhero was Spider-Man. Then in 2014, William travelled with his foster family from Sydney to Kendall. They were visiting their foster grandmother. It wasn't unusual. Families visited Kendall all the time to slow down, to escape from the city, to spend time together with family. The foster grandmother's house was lovely. It was quiet, it was peaceful, surrounded by bushland and open space. It was safe, it was familiar. It was just lovely, a lovely place to be. Nothing was ever suggested about any danger, and the next morning would change absolutely everything. It was September the 12th, 2014, and William and his sister were playing outside in the yard. Their foster mother and grandmother were very nearby. They were watching them. And William wore a bright red and blue Spider-Man costume. And at some point, for just a few minutes, he wandered towards the front of the property. He was out of sight for only minutes. And then his foster mother called him. There was no answer. She searched the yard, the driveway, the surrounding bush. Nothing. Police were called, and within a short time it became clear that the child wasn't hiding. William Tyrrell had vanished. The response was immediate and massive, and the police and volunteers, helicopters, search dogs flooded Kendall. Bushland was combed metre by metre. It was very meticulous. Creeks were drained, roads were checked, homes were searched. If William had wandered off, he should have been found, but there were no footprints, no clothing, no signs of a struggle, nothing. And days passed, and the investigation began to slow down, and fears for the worst began. And then William's photo spread across Australia, the smiling 3-year-old in the Spider-Man suit. Parents saw their own children in his face, and they became fearful, and they clamped down on the security for their children, restricting their children's movements like many times before when disappearances have happened. And I've got an article and a video up about how the Beaumont children disappeared. And I was the same age as Jane when she disappeared, and my parents were so fearful. They really clamped down on our movements, but I didn't understand really why at the time. It wasn't really explained to me. If it was, I didn't haul it on board. And so nothing was different in this case. Tips poured in about William, reports of suspicious vehicles. Strangers passing through were looked at very suspiciously. Unusual movements in the days leading up to the disappearance were reported. Every single lead was investigated, but none of them led to William. So let's go back a little bit and think about who was William. William is just not a statistic. He is a human being. God loves him. He's important to God, and he is important to us. So William was a 3-year-old, a small boy, an Australian child raised in foster care. His parents were white European, and they were born in Australia. But because of the household was unsafe, he was removed. And publicly available information describes him as the European background through his ethnicity was not ever a focus in this investigation, and sometimes people think it is, but we'll find that a lot of law enforcement are very neutral as far as ethnicity is concerned in Australia and in the UK. I'm not sure whether that's entirely true in the USA, but it is certainly true in my research in Australia and the UK. They were looking at the fact that he was a child, he was vulnerable, and he was missing, and he needed to be found. Years passed, and the investigation made different directions. Earlier on, police considered stranger abduction, passing through Kendall, seizing brief opportunities. There were a lot of true crime sleuths on the tail, but not enough. There's one thing I just want to note here, that one thing I really admire about the USA audience and the community. The true crime community in America is absolutely huge, absolutely huge. But not only that, it is well respected. I did a video about the TCC, which is a branch off, which is a little bit different, so I'm not talking about that. The true crime community in the United States is so revered and respected that law enforcement actually consults some of the ones that are more widely known and the more well-established and ones that are well qualified on YouTube. And you may watch them thinking that's a nice story, but behind the scenes, a lot of them are helping families, they're helping law enforcement. A lot of them are raising money for the families so the families can continue investigations by themselves. And really, it'll be great if the UK and Australia, I'm Australian, I was brought up in Australia, but I was born in the UK, and then as a tiny baby, 18 months old, I went to Australia and I was brought up and for 40 years, and then I lived in America and now live in the UK for over 30 years. And I know that there are so many crimes here that really aren't reported, and that's the beauty of the true crime community, that they pick up on stuff that perhaps the mainline media doesn't pick up on and makes it a focus point. And much of the true crime community has actually helped to solve cases, which is really exciting. So it'll be great if a lot of people watching, if watching from the UK and Australia, and you're young and you're energetic, and perhaps you've got qualifications. Some of these people have actually got qualifications. They've got degrees in criminology and things like that. Perhaps there's a path you can go down to help people to be found, to help the law enforcement in their jobs as well. So, not going to deviate anymore. Back to William. So years later, there was a possibility, they thought, of possible accidental injury, and perhaps there was a concealment of the body on the property. I don't think this is fair. There is no evidence of that. The theory disrupted. It was never proven. And it's a shame, because the foster grandmother has incurred a lot of brunts, a lot of threats. Her reputation has been tarnished because of what the media has reported, that there is a possibility of accidental injury. And even the foster mother, because the foster mother was there as well. So that's a shame, and then we need to be mindful of the people that sometimes, William is a victim here, but sometimes there are other victims that get brought into this when they shouldn't be victims. They're grieving, and it compounds their grief when they're accused of doing something they really didn't do, and it's been proven that they didn't do. So let's have a prayer for the foster grandmother and the foster mother in this case. As we know that, as in many missing child cases, the scrutiny always goes upon the family. So really we can't blame the law enforcement for that, but the media coverage wasn't fair. Nobody to date, to 2026, when I'm doing this video, nobody has been charged of the disappearance. That the case remains unsolved, but there was an inquest, so let's talk about that. The inquest was launched to examine the evidence. It heard testimony from investigators, experts, family members. Searches were conducted all over again. The ground was excavated. Waterways were drained again. Items were found, but nothing absolutely linked to William at all. The investigation shifted focus multiple times. Each new direction raised hope, but it all ended, unfortunately, without answers, to everybody's dismay. But what makes this case really haunting is that a small child just vanished, and he's completely vanished without any evidence left behind. No confirmed timeline. He just went out of sight. No verified suspect. No remains. No explanation of what may or may not have happened, or what, more importantly, what did happen. Just a gap. He's gone. Such a shame. Kendall is still a quiet town today in 2026. The railway remains, and it still runs. The farmlands still stretch across the landscape. Beautiful, beautiful area. People still gather in the same stores and community spaces. The town is just not known for its agriculture or poetry or history, but it's tied forever to a mystery, to a mourning, to a child who disappeared without any trace. So today, William Tyrrell would be a teenager, and the investigation remains open. Authorities continue to review the evidence. Tips are still accepted, so if you have any clue or any idea, if you're watching this, please contact Crime Stoppers Australia. Somewhere, somebody knows something. There's some link somewhere. Is he dead? Is he alive? The family needs to know. The authorities need to know. Justice needs to prevail. This isn't just a case, another file to be put on the shelf. It's an absence. It's William Tyrrell. It's his life who's important to God and his family and to many others. And he is gone. Sometimes the most unsettling mysteries aren't the ones with suspects. They're the ones with silence, and this one is no exception. A child playing in the yard, a momentary glance away, a town changed forever. So what happened to William Tyrrell? Well, what do you think? This has been Fatal Files. If you have thoughts, theories and reflections, share them in the comments. Subscribe for a deep dive, true crime and mystery episodes to come. I'm Paula-Rose. Stay aware, stay curious, pray for William, and I'll see you in the next file.